Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us on the number one breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. The Lord Mayor of Kampala is here, Arias Lukwago. He's not alone. He's joined by Mr. Mike Sebalo, a former Iyala MP, both of whom we are going to be expounding more on government's interventions as far as COVID-19 is concerned and also helping people pull through this 42-day lockdown that is impacting their livelihoods very, very badly. Well, we are going to be taking a look at those and a lot more. Very good morning, Lord Mayor and Mr. Mike Sebalo. Thank you for joining us on Morning at NTV. All right, let me kick off with you, Lord Mayor. Largely, what do you make of government's interventions when it comes to the COVID-19 interventions and also the livelihood alleviation programs that were put in place, the 100K and so forth? What do you make of all the interventions that have been expedited by government during this 42-day lockdown and previously going back to the COVID-19 pandemic when it began?
Well, we've been on record on this matter and our position is very clear. The interventions have felt short, rather have fallen short of what is required. They have fallen short of the standards you would expect in a country like Uganda. And of course, that was expected, given the track record of this regime. You know, a country which is on a brink of becoming a failed state cannot be a welfare state. I want to underline that. A country which is on a brink, on the verge of becoming a failed state will never be a welfare state. So it would be expecting too much if one thought that this regime would make meaningful interventions to address the plight of the people. That said, and to come to the specifics, you decide to take a decision to lock up people without a clear program on the interventions to be made. Because obviously you knew you were putting people out of business. You knew people are not going to be working for the 42 days. And you knew largely this economy is informal, largely. It's not a structured economy. People are not in structured employment. The very privileged few, you and I and him, at least can survive. But the majority of Ugandans are in the informal sector. And that informal sector lives from hand to mouth.
85%.
Oh, exactly. So a serious government ought to have come up with a comprehensive program to guarantee the survival of that 85% of the population, largely in urban areas.
A sector that was also grappling even before the pandemic in 2019.
Certainly. That sector has been struggling all through. Even during normal times, it's been struggling. But now you have a crisis of a pandemic, and you create yet another crisis of survival. So we are grappling with those two aspects. The fight against the pandemic, as well as the survival. And actually, the focus now, the spotlight, is getting away from the fight against the COVID to the survival of the people who have been put out of business, which is ridiculous. Because the primary goal and the central focus should be on the fight against the COVID. The debate should not be about how people should survive. No. The debate should be about the fight against COVID. So here we are. You have created this crisis. I'm telling you, it's dire. It's pathetic. And now you hear calls from here and there. People are asking for help. We are trying from within our limited resources also to intervene, but the work is humongous. I mean, the demands are quite large, high. So whatever you do is a drop in the ocean. And again, there is this debate which is really puzzling me, where you get detractors of some of us, the NRM zeroists, saying, for you, what have you done? If government has failed, why don't you help the people? You ask them, a government which has got a budget of trillions and trillions has terribly failed. What would you expect from one individual like myself? The small interventions we have made They can't assist, they can't help the situation. So government ought to have made a plan, a comprehensive one. And it shouldn't have been actually a unilateral act of President General Museveni. It should have been a multi-sectoral, not actually even multi-sectoral, all stakeholder involvement. You would have on board Parliament, you would have on board other government agencies like KCCA, and of course other key players within the religious and other sectors. But ultimately, the decision would be taken in Parliament. And we have said before, and we want to repeat it, the minimum they should have given at least 10,000 per day if it's a household. And for, that would translate to 420,000 for the entire period. That did not happen. They zeroed in on 100,000, which has turned out to be
and by Wednesday last week, when we hit the deadline, that money hadn't gotten to all the 500,000 people. And one of the mistakes was that they bypassed your office. They didn't go to the mayoral office in the registration of the vulnerable people. Do you think this was a mistake?
It was...
The LC1 and the mayoral office being bypassed.
You should add that it was a deliberate mistake. If at all it was a mistake, it was a design. Because at a national level, it's politicians handling it. You see the Prime Minister, you see the Minister for Gender, you see all of them running all over. But when it comes to local level here, where they know majority are opposition, they said, we don't want politicians in this. The Lord Mayor, the mayors, the councillors, the Kampala MPs, and beyond, even Wakisa and other areas, they said you are all out of this. Or we want a technical, actually the RCC, who is director appointed by the president, and the town clerk.
What was the reasoning behind that?
Obviously, you can see the...
Frustrate the Lord Mayor?
It was deliberate. It was deliberate. And once we mentioned this, again, those NRM apologists will always say, we are tired of your lamentations. Why are you lamenting? So for us, we want you to be proactive. I asked them, do you want me to box the Prime Minister so that she can allow us to operate? She can give us space? Do you want me to wrestle, for example, the RCC in Kampala to get to understand that we have a role to play? Or you want me to dig in my pocket and begin providing the interventions, which pocket is equally small? So those are all the challenges we are grappling. And now they are saying the exercise has closed, probably. Because actually they are fudging around.
They called for a continuation.
It's not that clear, because earlier on they had indicated they were extending it to Friday. The deadline has passed. No clear messages. And if you are to do a census in Kampala and ask how many people have asked, how many have been as lucky as Oroya in Gulu, how many? Out of the 157 households they earmarked, they identified, you would ask, those were even very few compared to the number of households we have here. I've told every border cyclist heads a homestead.
And there are over a million border cyclists.
Not a million, that is exaggerated.
You think?
Yeah, they are not over a million.
All right.
Even if you can sell Afre, 200,000 border cyclists in Kampala. I'm talking about Kampala.
Yes.
If you are talking about the entire country, probably you could be right there in a million.
All right.
In the region of a million rather. So you have matatu operators. They are in a region of 100,000, including touts. So there are so many. All of them are heads of families.
If you were to add the border cyclists and the taxi drivers and their touts, you'd cover the 500,000 mark.
The 500,000, which is the budget for all, I mean, which
the entire country.
The entire country. And for 157, it wouldn't even be enough. They are 100, that quarter for the city, Kampala, it wouldn't even be enough. So, because you have more than 157.
Indeed.
So, that is the situation we are grappling with. And the crisis they have created is that, look, people now are struggling to survive, to deal with other ailments, to deal with the pangs of hunger, to deal with the way they can manage their families and so on and so forth. And this is a situation which is really untenable. And that is compounded by the fact that there are no clear signs that the lockdown is about to come to an end. Because if we are left with like 12 days or 11 days, I'm not so sure. If we're left with 11 days to go, right now we should be having an exit plan. We would expect now General Kaguta Museveni to begin preparing to address the nation and say, look here, this is how we are going to unlock the country, to open up the economy, the country. So we shall start like this. Matatus will be operating on half capacity. We shall allow borders now to carry one passenger. We shall be allowing malls to do ABCD.
In the absence of that, it's like you're saying there could be an extension of this same lockdown.
Exactly. That's what I foresee. And that's going to be disastrous. I foresee an extension of this, and that's going to be disastrous. And this is where we have made a call to General Kaguta Museveni in the People's Government with Dr. Chiza Besigye that please don't dare drag Ugandans to the limit.
And on that note, let's also bring in Mike Sebalo, a former Iyala MP, with whom we also want to get his insights on this very, very pertinent conversation. A very good morning once again, Mr. Mike Sebalo. Well, he mentioned a very, very pertinent statement. He mentioned that a failed state like Uganda cannot focus on the welfare of its citizens. What do you make of that statement? And does it actually compound or reflect the realities that we are living in right now? Is Uganda indeed a failed state?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
I said it's on the brink of becoming a failed state.
So it cannot focus on the welfare.
It can't focus on the welfare.
Whichever way he puts it,
Yes.
I want to respond.
Please do.
First of all, I'd like to salute and welcome those that are viewing us directly and those following on the various platforms associated with this media house. We are going through a very challenging time, but we shall definitely get over it. And I just want to give you a lot of hope. Let's be hopeful in our minds, in our actions, and in our thoughts. Regarding my brother, whom I respect and I salute as a Lord Mayor,
Indeed.
you know, being a Lord Mayor of a capital that is in a government that is on the blink of being failed, and you are doing it for the third term, and you all the time you are saying it is on the blink, but you keep presenting yourself. It is a very interesting dimension.
It's by the grace of the Lord.
I admire him for managing a capital,
Right.
a capital of a country,
Glory be to the Lord.
of a country that is on the
failure.
blink, and this is the third time.
All right.
And he puts in very serious effort to retain that office. And I can tell you that even in 2026, he will be presenting himself still in the same frame of mind. So that is very interesting, and it is very...
Where do you pick that from?
It is very interesting, because you've said that before.
No, that I'm going to run again. Where do you pick it from?
You've always run again. This is the third time, and we've always been together. I know your trend. This is your capital, and we appreciate your domain. But so that defines what he calls a failed, because if it is failed and he hangs in there permanently, then that becomes very exciting. Now, regarding the idea that we are talking about of the lockdown, the challenges, the interventions being made, I think the conversation is interesting. There are aspects of his analysis that I can associate with, given the dynamics on the ground. One thing that we really need to appreciate as a country is that COVID is around. We need to come to terms with that factor and start planning for it in a manner that is much more sustainable, with good forecast, and getting all the stakeholders to play their respective roles. I think I really associate with that, because this is a problem that is not a problem for the government. It is a problem for the country. It is a problem for the people. So it is advisable, it would be a good thing that we get everyone on board we get all stakeholders on board and be able to do. We are doing a good job. The government is doing a good job, but we can do a better job with the participation of various stakeholders, getting all the ideas on the table and approaching it holistically from different perspectives. Because it is an issue to do with the leadership. And when we talk about leadership in this regard, we don't limit it to government leaders. We shouldn't limit it to political leaders alone, just like the mayor and all the other. But it should be all the leaders, cultural leaders, religious leaders, business community, those that are in the civic space. So because it is a challenge to humanity, and therefore we should be able to marshal capacities across board and have a uniform, kind of a unified engagement on the same. Nonetheless, what has been done is appreciated. The initiatives under the Prime Minister and the various stakeholders that are managing the processes of getting the relief, and I would like to call it relief because I don't imagine that there is capacity to deal with it in a manner that can be fulfilling as one would wish to have, because the families are challenged in terms of income. Some of them earn on a daily basis, but filling that gap in totality may not be an easy thing to do. But I think government needs to extend a gesture of goodwill, and the 100 that was offered needs to be appreciated from that perspective. Definitely it is not enough and it cannot be enough, but it should be appreciated from the perspective of extending a hand of help to those that are in dire need. And what needs to be done with that is to ensure that the efficiency levels and effectiveness of managing that is at the highest level, so that it goes to those that deserve it. It goes to those that should be able to get, so that the system of delivery and identification and the management should be thorough, so that those that are most deserving indeed do get that support, as it were. And then the statistics that you've talked about, something that needs to be really sharpened. We need to operate on the basis of correct statistics, so that we don't get people that ought to get it, not getting it out of using of wrong statistics. Right. So that is something that I agree with.
Speaking of wrong statistics, according to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, they actually contend that in Uganda here, we do have some 8.3 million poor people. Yes, but then according to the government, we are targeting only 500,000 vulnerable people. Don't you think a big chunk of people who might need this money are being left out?
Yeah, there's a difference between poor people and vulnerable people.
These were poor
I think
people
not. I think not all poor people are vulnerable people. And if you're
you sure?
Yes, I think
not all poor people are not vulnerable people.
Not all poor people are vulnerable people.
Oh,
because even poverty has levels. Like I'm with the mayor here. Definitely, if I compare myself to the mayor, I'm vulnerable.
According to you, boss,
but he's not.
According to you,
as
boss,
the mayor of Kampala, so it varies.
According to you, boss, they say that these 8.3 million people were poor before the pandemic. Now, entering through the pandemic, they might have grown vulnerable because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown measures, and so forth.
What I want to put across is that I don't dispute that. What needs to be done, and that's why I made the point of the statistics very clear, that we need to get to use correct statistics, so that those that deserve and those that ought to.
Mike Sebalu is the former Iyala MP with whom we are having this conversation, largely centering on government's interventions as far as alleviating the vulnerability of some people within this COVID-19 lockdown. Welcome back, and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. I still do have the Lord Mayor of Kampala, Arias Lukwago, and also Mike Sebalu, former Iyala MP, with whom we are actually campaigning on government's performance as far as the interventions are concerned in alleviating the COVID-19 spread, and also the interventions to improve the livelihoods of the people during this COVID-19 pandemic. Let's talk to Mike Sebalu. He was actually engaging us on the fact that they are not 8.3 vulnerable million people. But according to you, boss, before we entered 2019, there were 8.3 million poor people who might have grown vulnerable. Now that we actually called for the first lockdown measures in 2020, we've continued with the pandemic. We've called for another 42-day lockdown, meaning these individuals might have fallen into the vulnerability bracket. But then Mike Sebalu thinks otherwise. Very good morning once again, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, one thing that I want us to appreciate is that not all poor people are vulnerable people. But
I had wanted to respond to that, Romeo.
But all vulnerable people are poor people.
All right.
Because, for instance, there are those that may be in the bracket of poverty, but their income remains steadfast. Someone could be working from home and they're still able to earn from there. But there are those that earn on a daily basis. When you create any disruption, then you disrupt their cash flows. So there are all those dynamics. But I think the most important thing is to plan for the entire spectrum.
I see.
And be able to deliver, funds allowing. So there could be gaps, definitely, because I also realized that there were gaps in the level of stakeholder engagement. Like 2 weeks ago, the National Planning Authority came out to say that they were not quite involved at an early stage within the process of managing some of these processes. Definitely, that may have been a gap, because that is a strategic institution agency that should have basic role in engagement at that level. So there are some of these gaps that have been realized, and I think what needs to be done is to review the process. What has worked and what has not worked and why it hasn't worked. And I think we need to look at it from a long-term strategic perspective, because we need to look at interventions from the immediate, then we look at mid-term and long-term. Right now, there is talk about a third wave that could be in the offing. So I think there is a need to use the lessons learned, because I don't want to say that the intervention has been perfect. That would be an overstatement. There are gaps. So we need to review what hasn't worked, where the gaps were and where the lapses were, so that we prepare going forward for any further intervention in a much more comprehensive way, in a manner that can fill the gaps that may have been created. But what we need to appreciate is that the attempts and the interventions made have been undertaken, challenges notwithstanding and gaps notwithstanding. The beauty is to be able to pick lessons and ensure that going forward you don't make the same mistakes that have been
to pick lessons, so that you moving forward you don't make the same mistakes. Lord Mayor, it seems like this government has not learned anything from this pandemic. I mean, we are talking about week 5 of this lockdown, and still even the smaller number of people they had targeted to receive help have not fully received all this help. And you can also share with us your 2 cents on this submission on who is vulnerable and who is poor.
If we were to pick lessons, we had the first wave. And one would probably accept their excuse that, well, it was a global crisis, it was the...
but it remains global.
At that time, it was not expected at all. It caught us by surprise, and we had to learn on the job as we move along. That was an excuse.
The president kept on saying we couldn't shut the airport because of our Chinese counterparts, which was a big mistake. Go ahead.
Okay.
You remember.
But that is negated by the fact that You see, the framers of our constitution had earlier on foreseen that to happen. That look, if there could be varied emergencies of different nature and magnitude, but they provided the framework within the constitution and Article 110 on how to deal with emergencies. And that's why they said the center of operation should always be Parliament. That's where the proclamation should be made. That's where the debate should take place. And that's where the intervention should be agreed upon and all the appropriations made. But now the center, contrary to what is provided for in the Constitution, the center of operation is the presidency and the OPM. The presidency is dealing with rolling out the measures. Welfare is OPM. Actually, it would appear Nabanja is not at all concerned with the fight against the COVID. Her mandate, I think, is restricted to welfare, which is also wrong. Because if you are the lead of government business and you are supposed to present all the measures, including those geared towards the fight against COVID, it should be an all-rounder. Anyway, coming back to the point, if they were to pick lessons, by now we should be having a plan in place on how to deal with the same. Now hear what he's talking about, even about foreseeing a third wave, that it could be in the offing. And indeed that is true. But can't we avert it? Can't we avert it? Are there no models to learn from? Can't we benchmark our, other countries that have gone the same route?
Is the lockdown the only solution?
Is it the only solution? That is the question. Can't we go into mass vaccination, for example? Because right now, we could be concentrating on testing people and vaccinating them. But is it happening? Nowhere. So if you have not vaccinated the people, how are you boosting the immunity? How are you going to fight the pandemic?
And how shall you reopen?
Because, yes, experience has shown us that the only plausible solution to this is vaccination. The long-term solution is vaccination.
Which is a long shot now, because we are targeting 21.9 million people.
21.9
million tests,
exactly.
Vaccines have been undertaken.
And they are all donations. From our budget, I don't think we have bought even a single dose. We're just relying on donations. So how are we going to get out of this crisis? How are we, wait a minute, you had your time. How are we going to avert it? Even the supplementary they are appropriating, look at the budget they are talking of being appropriated. Colossal sums are going to State House. Others are going to security. Security to begin clobbering people, because now you've seen what is happening. They are just beating up people. As if they are beating COVID, they are beating COVID out of the people. So are you just going to fight COVID by beating up the people in the streets of Kampala? The traders who want to access their premises? It's not sustainable.
Heavy-handedness cannot achieve behavioral change.
High-handedness is not the solution. Those draconian measures can work for a short time. They are not a long-term solution.
People will be wearing face masks simply because they've seen a police officer and then remove it as soon as they walk away.
There are those who even appreciate that COVID is real and they take precautions. But now they're also faced with other challenges, social, economic challenges. And now it's a question of which risks should I take?
Do I stay in the house or do I die of hunger?
Exactly. That's a huge challenge. And no solution is being offered to that. And this is where now Parliament should be focusing and say, all the appropriations. Now we are cutting the budget for State House. We are cutting the classified expenditure for security. We are reallocating resources to health. Ruth Achenge has asked for 1.6 trillion, 1.7 trillion. That's what she asked for. And Kasaija, the Minister for Finance, said, yeah, you only have 361 billion. And actually, the entire supplementary budget is 600 billion. But in the earlier appropriations, they had allocated close to 1 trillion Uganda shillings to State House, which is not accounted for up to now. Can you fight COVID by taking money to State House? It should be going to where it should.
The local leadership, like your office.
Exact. Not only local office.
I had to throw that in.
No. But of course, yes.
To the mayor's parlor.
But even yes, cases, Kampala is the epicenter of COVID.
Indeed.
Right now, we don't have a budget for COVID, to fight COVID. For us, we have come up with our plan, if you may ask. I know there are those who will ask, as the Lord Mayor, what have you done? We have our own plan, which our Minister for Finance, Honorable Sabu, prepared together with our Secretary or Minister for Health, Honorable Namazi. We passed it in SEC, it's the Central Executive Committee of KCCA, presented it to Council, it was passed. We have passed it on to the relevant agencies for implementation. That's what the best we could do under the circumstances.
Indeed.
But now you ask the national government, where is your plan? Because if we are to be given an opportunity to explain what is entailed in our plan, they focus on mass vaccination, because we have over 800 vaccination sites in Kampala. Over 800.
All right.
But they are not functional. They are not operational right now because we don't have the doses. We have run short of even the testing kits. So how are we going to do the work without the tools, the equipment?
Indeed.
So that's where they should be putting focus. Now we could be creating, as far as case management is concerned, facilitating the village health committees to enhance capacity to do surveillance. It's important. We must have ambulances right now. We have not bought, ever since we got the first case of COVID here, March 2019, no, 2020. To date, we have not bought even a single ambulance for Kampala and Wachiso. Not one. Like
if
this.
we are sharing the same recommendations we did share last year during the pandemic or the first wave, it seems like government did not learn a single thing. Because right now, during the second pandemic and the second lockdown, health workers are still crying.
Exactly,
they're saying we do not have PPEs.
Saying. The last thing I want to talk about is this paradox. Not all poor people are vulnerable.
The 8.3 million.
The 8.3 million.
Go ahead. Then we get back to Sebalu.
That's really disturbing. I don't know his definition of vulnerability. And actually, they ought to have come up with the parameters so that I assess myself whether I fall within the category of those who are vulnerable or not. You get it? But they never put the test in place. So no one knows who is vulnerable and who is not. They just came up with the clusters. They say musicians, for example. And once you say musician, that includes tycoons like Baby Cool. So you get this. Baby Cool can be vulnerable because he's in the cluster. Yes. I'm sorry to use
Baby Cool.
Baby. I'm sorry, Bebe, not baby. So Bebe.
All right.
Bebe can be
part of the vulnerable people.
Part of the vulnerable people. But a trader in a shopping mall, say, Kwarisero.
Yes.
Who has been just earning some little income there. They are saying, for you, you are not vulnerable.
All right.
Because you are not living from hand to mouth. You have a shop there. You get it? Yeah. That's totally absurd.
All right.
So this notion of vulnerability has been stretched to levels of absurdity, has been vulgarized, and it has lost meaning.
Let's also bring in former Yala MP Mike Sebalu. Mike Sebalu, it seems like, according to the government, the number of vulnerable people has reduced in Uganda since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, in last year, 2020, we were talking about some 1.4 million people who are vulnerable and being targeted by food relief. But then this year, we are talking about only 500,000, meaning the number of vulnerable people, according to government, has actually reduced. How did we get to this?
No, I really want to believe that that time they were talking about individuals, and this time it is household. I think that creates a fundamental difference. But one thing that I want to share with my brother is that the definition needs to be very clear, and the categorization needs to be clear to abuse any kind of abuse that could come out of the same. So it is something that needs more attention, so that whatever little that you've been able to extend as relief goes to those that deserve it, that are most deserving. So I really want to agree with that, that there is a need to ensure that the methodology used and the formula applied is able to get all the people that are supposed to benefit.
Of course, we won't be able to find those individuals. We won't be able to find those individuals, Mr. Mike Sebalo, if we are using wrong data coming in from the Gender Ministry. Because according to you, boss, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, they said the Gender Ministry data was actually wrong, but government has continued to use the same data.
No, that's why I said that this kind of intervention should be multi-sectoral.
Multi-sectoral.
So you need to get all the ministries, departments and agencies of government that are relevant to that exercise to integrate their data and be able to harmonize their position in such a way that it reflects the reality on the ground. And that's why in my earlier submission I said that if there are gaps, if there are those gaps that have been identified or the methodology that didn't work, it is a subject of review, because this is not an event. It shouldn't be treated as an event. It's gone.
Recommendations are not cast in stone.
We need to subject it to review and be able to identify the gaps where they are, and going forward, such gaps are filled or such lessons are learned.
As we clamor for reviews, the Lord Mayor is of the view that this government has not learned anything from this pandemic, given the fact that we are still having health workers who are saying, I do not have enough PPEs, yet we are in a second lockdown, not even the first. These are the same recommendations were made in the previous COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. So here we are in the same position, meaning government has largely learned nothing. Even a review might not even compound.
Short of
this
oxygen
No,
cylinders, ICU beds and whatnot.
I want to believe that there are lessons that are learned. There could be situations that the response is not up to speed.
All right.
But definitely to tell me that there are no lessons learned would be to imagine that government is insensitive or government is not taking the matter seriously. I believe that they do take it seriously. The response could be slow in terms of availability of capacity to immediately reverse the trend. But my view is that the Prime Minister and the team around it and the multi-sectoral approach that we are talking about is the best answer. And I want to believe that that is the approach that government is taking. Yep.
Do you also envisage a situation where we extend this lockdown? I mean, we are in week 5 and we haven't fully exhausted the 500,000 households that we are targeting with the money or cash incentive that we are targeting them with. Do you envisage a situation where we lengthen this COVID-19 pandemic given the current factors?
Now, according to the Office of the Prime Minister, they were really, they had covered quite some good mileage out of that, and there were a few, according to their statistics. I don't want to use the mayor's statistics and
just do a random survey. You were here in Kampala. Come and do a random survey here in the city.
I'm quoting the Prime Minister's office and the ministries that are mandated to do that. I want to believe that they are truthful in their statements. And according to them, they've gained quite good ground, and the few people out of those identified yet to be handled, they've made an undertaking to have
None of my neighbors, Mike Sebalo, have received any of this money. None of my neighbors within Nansana municipality. This is an area with over 34,000 vulnerable people. None of them has come to my house to say, Romeo Busiku, yes, you've made the noise on TV, and yes, we've received the money. None of them have received this money, at least my neighbors.
Yeah, that is your neighborhood. I don't have any reason to doubt your statement, but I'm simply quoting the office of the Prime Minister in terms of the coverage and in terms of what they've been able to do.
Let me ask,
maybe according to his point, and then we go to the
just a quick intervention in there. I will ask you to join me in tasking the Prime Minister to pick one slum area in Kampala and use it as a pilot and carry out a random survey there and see how many have received. Because for her, she's just online. She's just in her office checking on the system and the data being supplied to her by the Ministry of Gender and the town clerks and say, we have registered progress. But on the ground, you come and carry out a survey and find out how many people have received it.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, that's why, and I'm not, that's why I'm very careful. I'm quoting.
Indeed.
I'm quoting the information being shared, and that's why I'm saying that going forward, I think the best case scenario is to involve all the stakeholders, like he's indicating, the mayor's office and even the local leaders, so that the intervention meets the expectations of the population.
Indeed.
And those that are identified and are worthy of partaking of the intervention are all taken care of. That way, the interventions will be reflecting the reality.
In your opinion, Mike Sabalo, is this 100,000 Uganda shillings enough? The Lord Mayor is saying it should have been 10K every day for the next 42 days, meaning 420,000 Uganda shillings. In your opinion, this 100K for 42 days, is it sufficient?
No, definitely it isn't. And I remember when I was making my earlier submission, I did indicate that this is kind of a gesture of goodwill. It is a relief.
A gesture of goodwill.
That's an insult.
Taxpayers' money, Mike Sabalo.
No, you see. No, maybe I've used
no.
Correct it.
No,
he has the chance to correct
I think I want to qualify my statement.
Go ahead.
The government is identifying with the plight of people in a challenging situation.
It seems like this is their mandate, Mike Sabalo.
Identifying with
the mandate of the government to offer social protection during such time.
You see, I think we are taking it to a different level, because ordinarily, without this kind of challenge, the people would be managing their affairs in terms of their livelihood. Now, the disruption has caused a situation where they are unable, and government is intervening to create some kind of relief, to kind of support the process of getting the people managed in a very difficult situation. So to me, it is a relief.
All right.
And the best case scenario would be to manage it in totality. But the different challenges and the different pressures on the resource envelope, because you have to make various interventions. You are dealing with the caseload as it is. You are dealing with the matters of vaccination, challenges notwithstanding. You are dealing with, so government is trying to use a multi-pronged approach. And in the case of the livelihood, an intervention of 100, definitely it can't be enough, and it will never be enough. It may even be difficult to agree on what is enough, because it can be relative. Because even the 400 you are talking about, someone could say it's not enough. But I think there must be some minimum intervention made. And in the wisdom of government, they came up with 100,000. So for me, the most important thing is for that 100,000 to reach out to whoever should be in position to get it.
Former
When you get those numbers, make sure that all those that ought to get it, get it.
So that I want to be on record.
All right, Lord Mayor,
I just want to be on record. I take exception of the statements he has made.
Go ahead.
You see, you are insulting Ugandans, people who can work for themselves. You lock them up in their homes. By the way, whoever peeps out through the window, they are clobbered back into their homes. And now you are just telling them this is just a gesture of goodwill. This is just to identify with your plight, and so on and so forth. Look. Let me conclude the point.
No. I think
let him finish. Then we go back.
He's creating a narrative that is not right.
Let me create. No, I listen to you. People are watching.
Yes,
people have been watching. They can bear testimony. You see, this is how this government has treated the Ugandan citizens as beggars.
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Actually, it is dehumanizing. You find able-bodied men and women now kneeling before you asking, Meya Nyamba, mpayo wachiri olukumi, wachiri mpayo etano mberewo. You have literally turned Ugandans into beggars.
And these are people we considered poor before, but are now vulnerable.
The 8.5 million people. Those you are saying, they are poor, but not vulnerable. They are becoming vulnerable because their source of livelihood has also been cut off.
Indeed.
I could be poor, but I've been assisted by you, who is privileged enough, at least to be in structured employment.
Indeed.
And for me, I'm not employed, I'm poor. But you are saying, since I've been, COVID found me poor, I'm not vulnerable. And I had the minister and our team was saying, this is not a poverty alleviation program. Who told you people are looking at this program as a poverty? No. People are saying, look, yes, we want to join you in the fight against COVID. We want to move in tandem with the government in as far as the fight is concerned. But are we facing the challenges equally? This discrimination we are talking about, there is a handful of people who actually are on holiday of sorts. It's a holiday for them. They are not faced with the hardship at all. Their vehicles are moving, their children are studying in schools, well-to-do schools. They are the ones who even performed very well in PLE and so on and so forth. They have not been affected at all. And here he's telling Ugandans that we are trying to identify with you. That is wrong. The third one, before I forget again,
please,
because it is also paining me.
Indeed.
This issue they have created about, because you can't leave it out. It's a very serious one, where you have children who have been now passed out from PLE, from primary rather.
Yes. They
are supposed to join secondary. Now they are those who have stagnated in senior one. Now we have 2 classes.
Indeed.
At least I've seen it being highlighted several times here on NTV. But there are no solutions to that. It's a serious issue. These are signs of a failed state. This is what I'm saying. These are signs of a failed state. That what was so difficult in the beginning to say it's going to be a long haul, and you declare a dead year. I'm a parent. I have a daughter who is in senior one. I have a son who has just finished PLE and is joining senior one. Now, I look a fool before my kids. They ask me, Daddy, go to single bit together. Are we both now in senior one? You can't understand it.
Indeed, it's a confusing situation.
It's really very confusing. And you cannot tell how this is going to be solved. Now you get the first lady, who is privileged enough to share the same bedroom with the person who is issuing these orders, cannot also answer these questions.
Meaning the psychological distress on the citizens right now pertains to law information coming in from government on whether or not we are going to be reopening anytime soon. They're not telling us.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. These are all signs of effect. That's where I started from, where you cannot clearly tell Ugandans the program for education. You cannot tell them the calendar, how it's going to run. And when next week, I think, they are going to release UCE. Normally it is after a week following the release of PLE. So it's going to be next week probably, or the week after. So after they have released, now we are going to have S5. 2 sets of learners in 1 class. So how is that going to have in S5?
All right. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. That is Erias Lukwago, the Lord Mayor of Kampala. Let's also bring in Mike Sebelu. You have a reaction to his submission that you wanted to make.
Yeah, I think the reaction that I want to put forward is that we are managing a disrupted environment.
Yes, Mr. Sebelu.
To imagine
in a disorganized manner.
To imagine that life is being managed in a normal way would be a fallacy. Therefore, the lockdown is not a luxury of government that it wishes just to punish people. It is a necessity given the challenge and the threat levels that we are having. And it should be appreciated from that perspective. Looking at it from a viewpoint as if government is simply doing it for the sake, or government is is doing it because it is not interested. In some places, in Rwanda, for instance,
Rwanda, how is it done?
It is a full lockdown.
57,000 cases within Rwanda, yes.
Yes. So this is the environment under which we live. And
But
as leaders...
Is a lockdown the only solution, sir?
We need to... It is part of the solution. Everywhere it has been applied, it may have varying degrees of success, but at least it has been seen to be a tested way of managing spread, because mobility is one of the reasons that enhances super spreading and mobility. So by curtailing it, you are trying to manage the speed of spread, which is an issue in this case. So is it now, the question that I want to ask both of you, in the circumstances, is it a good thing to lock down, or is it the worst that can be to have a lockdown?
Can I respond to that?
The level and the threat that we are having.
Lord Mayor, respond to that.
You see, they are taking lockdown as a permanent solution to COVID. You lock down in preparation for vaccination.
And that is exactly what
For
is
me,
being
I wouldn't
done.
have a problem.
Because
in the first
no
lockdown,
vaccinations are happening.
no, vaccination is not happening.
No, vaccination has been happening in your
How many,
place.
for us, let me tell you, for
and
us,
Parliament
listen,
just passed.
Vaccinations have not been happening, Mr. Sebalo.
it can happen
We
to
are still
you, it can
stagnated
happen.
at 1.1 million vaccinations.
I think it is one thing to say that when you say vaccination has not been happening, maybe you'd rather
During this
qualify-
42-day
you'd
lockdown.
rather qualify it and
see,
say it is not happening at the speed. But it's been happening.
Listen.
Even in Kampala here.
Listen.
Lord Mayor, go ahead.
I'm giving you
But
information.
it is not at the level that would want.
All right.
I'm one of
First-hand
those,
information.
I'm one of those who is advocating for mass vaccination.
Indeed.
Definitely, that is something that must be done. And I believe that government is preparing for that.
Indeed.
Is making arrangements to have the vaccines procured. There is also the politics.
Now, you see
at
the contradiction.
There's a politics.
You hear the contradiction.
No, there's a
the
politics
arrangements to procure the vaccines.
No, but,
you can finish,
no,
Sebalo.
you see, we need also to appreciate what is happening globally in terms of equity and access to some of these vaccinations. There is a big outcry across where the vaccines and access and equity, matters of equity, are a subject of global debate. Let us not pretend that we are not privy to this kind of conversations. Even when the head of state on 2 occasions...
3 billion of those
he has
vaccinations have
been-
gone to 10 countries.
He has been
Indeed.
addressing a WHO meeting here in Kampala. His main subject of discussion was the approach that the big powers have used in terms of making these vaccines available and accessed on an equitable basis. That challenge is there, and we don't need to be blind about it. So there are all these dynamics at play.
The Lord
and we
the
need
Lord
to-
Mayor
We have
would beg to
offered a
differ.
solution to
Yes.
that.
Go ahead, sir.
We have said if we cannot we cannot get enough vaccines, let us rationalize what is available. Initially, we got a donation of 960,000 doses, and then we got another batch of 170. As KCC, we are given 50,000 in a city which has got close to 4 million people day population. That is totally nothing. It's a drop in the ocean. But the suggestion we have given in people's government, let's identify clusters of those who are most vulnerable. Vulnerable not in terms of welfare now, in terms of the what medics call morbidity. Those who have underlying problems.
Indeed.
Those who have pressure, those who have diabetes, those who have HIV, and so on and so forth. And then you get the elderly, 50 and above, I think you qualify. And then the teachers. If you vaccinated the teachers, the schools have to open.
Indeed.
After vaccinating the teachers, in schools you provide mechanisms of SOPs and how to manage those who fall sick.
Yes.
And then you open the schools. This is what we are. But where is the plan? So if you have failed to get the vaccines, should we remain in permanent lockdown?
We need to make the record
So
clear
should we
here.
remain in permanent lockdown?
The record
because
clear.
the world has refused to supply us with
Yes,
vaccines.
Mike Sebalo.
What the road mayor
Yes.
is saying that is a suggestion from the people's government is exactly the policy that was put forward for vaccination.
No, that's not
Government
true.
came out and said that frontline workers will be first, then you get those with underlying causes, and even those that fall in the bracket, age bracket. That is exactly what the ministry...
Gentlemen, I have like 3 minutes that are left. Gentlemen, I have like 3 minutes that are left to the end of this conversation, and I wanted to focus on who is being left out in this vulnerability bracket. We are focusing on the people in the ghettos, townships, and so forth. But then what about those within the rural areas who are not readily going to the farm to till for food? Do you think, what do you make of this analogy coming in from government, that only those within the urban ghettos are vulnerable and not those within the rural areas? Lord Mayor, we have 3 minutes.
You see, I told you welfare, a failed state cannot be a welfare state. To take care of everybody across the board in the entire country requires a system which is well functional, a government which is well organized. But we lowered the bar and agreed and accepted this is the government we have. And indeed, Mr. Museveni was very clear. He wants government of fishermen.
Lord Mayor, could it be that the people we thought were food sufficient are also dying of hunger?
Yes.
In the villages? Could it be that the people we thought were food sufficient in the villages are also dying of hunger and should be targeted by this money?
That is the ideal. They are dying of hunger, it's true. They are equally vulnerable. Because this economy is integrated. Their basics they also want to get from shops. They have also to sell their agricultural produce. The mangoes here are rotting in Kampala and Nakasero. They can't fetch them any income. You can get a basket of mangoes at just 5,000. You go home. Now you ask, you're buying from a middleman, a market vendor. How about that one who transported it? How about the one now going back to the farmer who has grown these mangoes? You go to Nakasero market and see all those. Actually, the city is painted yellow, mangoes all over.
The elderly are also vulnerable, Lord Mayor. Should we also be targeting them instead of this Sage Money Monthly?
We should be targeting everybody.
And the refugees
That's
too.
what a welfare state should be doing. That's how a caring government, that's what a caring government should be, a competent government should be doing. But we are saying we know the kind of government we have in place. And we had to lower the bar and say, okay, fine, agreed. Let's deal with those in urban areas, because one way or the other, those people in the villages, if the mangoes are rotting, at least they can't die. They can eat the mangoes. They can eat jackfruits.
Even those in the refugee settlements, Lord Mayor, should we leave the welfare of this of the refugees at the mercy of the international funders?
That is extremely dangerous. Actually, one area which have not been tackled, which
refugees.
The refugees, those in Nachivare, those in Changwari, those in all these camps we have set up. I'm telling you, they're extremely vulnerable. So there is no specific fund that has been earmarked for them in all these budgets we are appropriating. So I would invite you to look at this budget. It is skewed. It is skewed. There is 6 billion for security, for example, in this supplementary budget. Parliament, Madam Amongi, the Prime Minister, the Speaker, look at that budget. If you really care for Ugandans, look at that supplementary budget.
The Lord Mayor of Kampala, Arias Lukwago, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Let's just give a minute to Mr. Mike Sebalo to also give us his submission moving forward. The focus is on urban ghettos, yet people in the rural areas are also dying.
Yeah, I think
Final point.
The best case scenario would have been to target all those people.
Refugees, elderly, rural dwellers.
That would be the best case scenario. But reality and availability and capacity had to be applied such that you begin with the highest level of vulnerability, because even vulnerability varies from section to section. The vulnerability in the urban areas vis-a-vis that in the rural areas may vary in certain aspects. Like is indicated, those people could still access their gardens and they could access some food. But the best case scenario would have been capacity and resources allowing.
Reality, so availability, and the capacity.
In a case of managing the dynamics are You had to begin somewhere, and they began with the urban.
And you end up nowhere.
Mike
Begin
Serrano
somewhere
is
and
a
end
former Iala MP. We also did have the Lord Mayor of Kampala, Arias Lukwago, expounding more on the government's performance as far as interventions are concerned during this COVID-19 pandemic. We are in week 5 of this total 42-day lockdown. My name is Romeo Busiku. To the kings, queens, boys and girls who are celebrating their birthdays on this particular day, please be cognizant of the fact that the COVID-19 disease is pretty much here. Wear a face mask and ensure social distancing of at least 2 to 3 meters.